Thank you, Dean Eichler. I'd also like to, at this point, acknowledge the presence of Assemblyman Guillermo Linares, who has been a strong supporter of College Edge and education in general. His DREAM Act has been working to help everyone achieve a college education, like College Edge. We're tremendously grateful for his support and encouragement, and gratified that he's chosen to attend here today, and he would also like to share a few words with you. Assemblyman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing? Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you so much for this initiative right here in the heart of our community, Washington Heights, and I want to commend Yeshiva for organizing this and inviting all of you. I was looking at you as I was being introduced. I am the assembly member for this area, which is the 72nd Assembly District in the New York State Assembly. I represent Washington Heights, Inwood, and Marble Hill, which is the northern part of Manhattan. But as I see you and you're preparing yourself to go to college, it reminds me of when I was where you are now. I was newly arrived. I came to the Bronx, the East Tremont section of the Bronx, straight from a farm in the Dominican Republic in the North Coast. Not a word in English. I didn't know English. I knew how to chase animals. I knew how to work the land. I was the oldest of 7 then. I'm the oldest of 9 now. And I knew I had a job in a bodega waiting for me when I got here. So that was my first job until I got held up. I went 3 months to junior high school. I got beat up real bad a few times. And then I went to high school in the Bronx, Roosevelt High School. I gotta tell you that those years, the 4 years in high school for me, were the most difficult and challenging years for me because I didn't know English at all, and yet I had to compete with students who knew English, and so I was at a big disadvantage. Coming from a farm to a city, I'd never been in a large city, so it was really tough for me. And in fact, I was able barely to make it out of high school with a general diploma, which means with that diploma that you could go find a full-time job. By the time I finished high school, I was working in a supermarket because I was held up in the bodega, and then I went to work in a supermarket in East Tremont. And my mother, who convinced my father to come to New York, because schools in my hometown in the Dominican Republic went up to 8th grade. And she knew that if I didn't go to high school and I didn't prepare with an education, I was going to be a farmer in the Dominican Republic. And she came to New York undocumented. She brought my father. They were here undocumented. They got green cards, and then they sent for us. And I'm only telling you this story because it was the decision that my mother said, we came here, we work hard, we brought you here. If you don't get an education, I never went to school, I learned myself to read and write. But if you don't go to school, then all that we're doing will be for nothing. And I was able to enter City College of New York. And it was there that I learned, while I entered college, I learned English finally. You know, I began to be able to write and to read well and so forth. And I learned about the civil rights movement. I learned about the struggles of minorities in this country, about blacks, Latinos. I learned about Martin Luther King. I learned a little bit about my history, Dominican history. But I also learned about Latin American history and African history and history in the Middle East, and history in Europe, and Asia. And I learned about people's struggle. And it was in college that I was able to put in perspective who I was. So I decided at City College to become a teacher. And I wanted to be a teacher because I went literally through hell when I first got here. And I said, I want to help young people who come from different countries, especially if they come from the Dominican Republic, and I came to be a teacher in this neighborhood. That was way before, maybe when your parents were young, that I was a teacher here. But I began to help families, and I had students in 5th grade right here in Washington Heights in the 70s. And I began helping people and organizing people here. Well, 15 years after being in education and the kid that was not college material, I went to do my master's at City College. Then I wanted to be a principal, and I went to do a master's at Fordham University. And the advisor in my high school, I remember, I won't say his name, he was white at the time. He saw me and he says, you're not college material, you could get a job, you know, and make ends meet. And not everybody goes to college, he told me. And I listened to him and I thought he was right, except my mother won't have it any other way. Well, that kid that he told, you're not college material, not only got 2 masters, as I said, but I got my doctorate degree from Columbia University in 2005, and that kid that was not college material became, in this community, the first Dominican ever elected in the United States of America. The first Dominican. And I didn't stop there. I served this community. I was later then appointed by the mayor of the city of New York to be commissioner of immigrant affairs to represent 3 million immigrant New Yorkers in the city of New York. And then I decided to leave that position to come back to continue to serve my community here in Northern Manhattan in the State Assembly. Last year was my first year in the State Assembly, and I introduced a legislation that legalizes the delivery industry. Delivery industry are the taxis where yellows don't go that serve 7 million New Yorkers where yellows don't go. Whenever you need to take a taxi, the deliveries, that industry has been illegal for 42 years. I introduced legislation and it was passed in the Assembly, in the Senate, and the governor signed it. And now the delivery industry, which is our industry, serving people of color and the majority of New Yorkers, it is legal in the city of New York. That's my legislation that I was able to accomplish. And I'll conclude with this. This year, my priority is a legislation that is historic. It is called the New York Dream Act. And that legislation allows immigrant students that are in the state of New York and manage being undocumented to get their high school diploma with all the difficulties when you are undocumented with your family and you're able to get that diploma. My legislation will now allow for a student who is immigrant, inter-college, to be able to apply for financial assistance, to be able to finish a degree from the university as you're entering now. That's my legislation. We're working very, very hard to try and get it passed in the Assembly, in the Senate, and for the governor to sign. It's a big struggle. There's a lot of support for it, and I hope that we can be successful, because if you get a degree, a 4-year degree, you make $25,000 a year, more than if you stay with a high school diploma. 25,000 more. Multiply that for the years that you're going to be working. The other thing that I will leave you with is what I learned when I came from that farm and what my parents taught me and people who helped me along the way is that the one thing that nobody can take away from you is your heritage, your pride, your family, and the education that you get. Because wherever you land, wherever you go, if you have that education, nobody can take that away from you. And that's the only way you could help others. And the most important thing for every single one of us is when we are prepared and successful in whatever we set out to do, the opportunity will come for us to help others. Because there's nothing greater in life than that. And material things can be here today, tomorrow they're gone. But when you have an education, that is yours for the rest of your life. So I wish you the very best, success, and I'll see you around. We're waiting for you to graduate from college to help us make sure that all the injustices that we have and the opportunity that we need to create, not just in our neighborhoods, in New York City, in the state, but for the rest of the world, we need to really make that difference, and you can make it happen. But you gotta go to college, you gotta finish, you gotta do the best you can, and you gotta come back to the community to help be successful. All the best to you. Thank you very much.